Call this meeting to order. We're here to discuss the railroad property funding. And we also have Mr. Martison here to fill us in on some of the aspects on the review of the survey and concerns that he had. So, you want to start out, Dan?
I can. Dan Martinson, for the record, planning administrator. So I was asked to review the purchase and sale agreement and then the survey that was completed by the boundary survey that was completed by HMH Engineering, and kind of give basically an overview or due diligence overview of the property. And so while we didn't do a full in-depth survey, certainly came up with a handful of the issues, and the primary things that came with the development of this property is going to be significantly expensive to develop for a few key reasons. Number one, or ish, they're all about the same. Water and sewer, while available to Spunstrand, are service lines only to Spunstrand. So to bring water and sewer from South Fork Sewer District as well as the Central or East Shoshone Water District would come from the freeway crossing and would be what's considered a main extension, because you'd connect to wherever that main is and bring those main lines all the way up that frontage road or through the property, however it was best designed. But either way, it would be an extensive amount of sewer and water install, along with any other utilities that might have to go with that. But particularly sewer and water is always a particularly expensive one. So those main extensions to bring in those resources for development of that property would be a pretty significant price. We haven't seen any estimates on that, and I don't have any at the moment, but we can certainly get a general per foot cost. And knowing that at 1,000+ feet, it would be very significant for the engineering and the installation of those mains, because it would mean coming from either end. There's nothing in the middle. Okay. So those are the two, significant immediate costs. The third one would be the Trail of Coeur d'Alenes that runs pretty close through the middle of the property. It is to the southwestern side a bit, but certainly inhibits much of the area for the potential for development. And in order to move that trail, it's certainly not the Parks and Rec Department didn't outright say no, because the decision hasn't been put in front of them to say yes or no to. But it certainly would be a difficult process to get the state to relinquish that right of way that was awarded to them as part of a settlement from the railroads. And so the original railroad settlements that gave the trail all along this way was awarded to the Parks and Rec Department for the continual maintenance of the trail. So to move that would be a state level decision. I don't know that it would be legislative, but it would be a state level decision with Idaho Department of Parks and Rec. And then it would be the construction cost to remove that trail and place a new connector or some way somehow, either along the frontage road or along that southwestern border with I-90 right away. So the cost of that would be another added significant expense to the development of the property. Fourth one is in the environmental covenants and the consent decrees that came with the judgment that came with this remediation of this yard, the Wallace Yards and the Hercules, is a continual testing and monitoring that cap and that mitigation of the remediation is held in place. So annually, the Union Pacific pays environmental company to perform soils samples and testing, and then a general oversight to make sure that the cap and the remedy that was put on the property, I don't know when it was remediated, 7+ years ago, to make sure it's maintained. Once you develop a site, of course, you're going to have buildings and parking lots and landscaped areas and stuff. You would be maintaining those areas anyway, and that is how we deal with remediated yards in this valley, is we put caps on them and we maintain those caps. The rest of the property, because it's a very elongated multiple pieces on both sides of the road and the river and there's an expense to track those to make sure those areas are not being I don't want to say violated, but being
In compliance with
in compliance with the mitigation for it. So there'd be an ongoing expense that goes with the remainder of the areas that have been mitigated. It's a limited property. There'd be the expense of the survey work and the description, which some of that's been done. Although this is only a partial survey, it's not a full survey. For the annexation process, because there'd have to be a full legal description created in order for the city to annex that area in adjustment to incorporate that area. So there'd be the added expense of that survey. My understanding is we have some preliminary version of an approval from the city to annex, but nothing's been formally presented to them for an official yes, they would annex. There would have to be a hearing process for them to formally annex. So until that happens, I'd be a little unsure of whether or not you could build the sheriff's station there versus any other development, because obviously the purpose of the annexation was that the sheriff's jail has to be within the county seat.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to place this facility there, it would have to be within the city limits.
Okay.
Access-wise, it's got access off of frontage road and on both ends. It's got the area between the road and it's affected by the road and the I-90. Some of the area is within the floodplain. There's a parking lot area on the northeastern side. There's some floodplain in there, and the floodplain is predominantly with the river on the other side of the frontage road. So the floodplain wouldn't terribly affect development of the property.
Okay.
It would be that area where you develop. Maybe that parking lot area, or the area that's northeast of the road, kind of the Hercules Mill site parking lot area. If you were to do something there, the part of that is in a floodplain, but overall, it's not a significant portion. And probably the bigger one, the biggest thing is that in the purchase and sale agreement, there's a specific section on page 7 that discusses post-sale covenants, section number 9,
Mm-hmm.
and it particularly addresses restrictions on use. And the property must not be used for residential, lodgings, or accommodations, including without limitation. And I think that's a key phrase here. The hotels, motels, boarding houses, dormitories, hospitals, nursing homes, or retirement centers, all of those descriptions or definitions fall within the same occupancy standard as institutions for housing. So jails fall into that same category. It just simply wasn't listed here. And so it is a place. It's versus a manufacturing facility like Spunstream. People don't live there. They come to work there and they go home.
Mm-hmm.
They don't live there and they don't recreate there. In this case, people would be living on site, and there would be that continual management of people living there. So I think it's in the original, and that's in the purchase and sale agreement. In the original covenant, it restricts that, but not to that degree. So it restricts residential use, says it allows for commercial and industrial, but institutional falls in between commercial and industrial as far as an occupancy goes.
Okay.
From the building code classification standpoint. So I think if you're going to look at it from an institutional standpoint, they're listing it here as restricted from that particular use. So that would be something to discuss or have as a reason for maybe not the best property for this purpose. I don't think I have anything more in particular.
Okay.
On that.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Try to answer questions, or go seek more answers if you thought you needed more.
Any public
So
comment?
that is just a partial survey that we received.
Yeah.
They did initial boundary overlay. They did not set any pins. They did not set any on the ground. They did not do any of that field work that way. They went and found some benchmarks and identified that most of it is what I would call a paper survey.
Okay.
They've used the deeds and descriptions to create a survey, but not any actual. So there'd be more expense to put pins in the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
More formalized where the boundaries actually are.
Okay.
Did you want to comment on something?
John Hanson, just for the record. I worked on this project for about 3 years, and we did have architects service come up out of Boise, and they did do all of the questioning and a lot of their road work for water and sewer. They knew that that would be an expense to go under the road or around the road either way. They knew that the utilities also would be expensive to do. All this, those particular items were, I know, in the initial bid. The trail itself, we had talked to the Parks and Rec, and they did not have a problem at that time of, I won't say approving it, but they took it under advisement that they would be able to relocate that if it was necessary. The other problem and the annexing of the city, Jay and I did go to the city, they were receptive to annexing it into the city. And like Dan said, nothing ever went further than that, and I understand it. The biggest point that I want to make on this property is that there are two other entities that had approached us that want to buy some of the remaining property. So it's not like you're going to spend this money and not recap anything, because both of them, one of them is a well-established business, and well, both of them are well-established businesses, and they want to, at that time, wanted to purchase property to build their facilities on it.
Now, what businesses were they?
Well, I can't say that because it's, I'm not sure.
Do we
if
have
they're
a
still
file
gonna-
of that information
Yeah.
somewhere? Okay.
And there's a big file on all that went through on all these meetings when we were trying to get this passed the first time. Mike Gunderson had it, I'm sure it's still over there.
Okay. Well, one of the problems we're having is the $2 million that we're getting from the Maverick building is actually 1.7 of that had to be put into our budget this year to even cash flow the budget. So now we're looking at possibly using LATCF funds, and we don't have an answer for that as of yet from Colleen, whether that would even be an option or not. So that's kind of what today's meeting was. She hasn't got back to me on it, so that's where we're at with this. So I really don't have any other, there's really no other funding at this point except for that, and we don't have the answers as of today. So
I'm trying to gather all the facts and
And
put it together.
the biggest point that I want to express is that the way the valley's going and the prices of things, you're never going to buy a piece of property, put the jail on at that price.
Yeah.
So you spend the money now, you're going to recoup it when you get the other two investors.
You
Pay for the whole thing.
did you guys ever figure out? Did they ever tell you what they pay per year on that environmental test that the?
No, and that brings up another point. Ron and I discussed a lot of different things on this purchase, and if the railroad was opposed to a jail going on it, they said so right off the bat.
Okay.
So because he knew exactly what we wanted it for and exactly what we were doing, and like I said, I've been working on it for 3 years, so he knows exactly what it was for. And a lot of these issues were brought up when we were trying to pass it.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I'm sure they've all increased, but at that point, a $22 million budget for a jail and facility was a dream. You could knock that down by probably 8 to 10,000 and be where you want to be.
Now, was that including the land when you guys did the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were going to purchase the land and through that bond.
If we could have passed it, and then
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, they were. I'm not sure if PAC was interested. Yeah, I think PAC and their council was interested. I can't remember the other one. So, and that was because that the sheriff's department could house a lot of the federal prisoners, and at that point, we were guaranteed 30 prisoners a day, whether they were there or not. And that was at $75 a person. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and we need to generate some
Yeah,
revenue for the
They're not
county.
gonna do it.
Okay.
It pretty much pays for a lot of the operation right there.
Okay. Got any more questions?
Well, knowing there's a file that potentially that the sheriff's office would be helpful to know, so we can go review that file and see if there's other information in there or whatever.
Okay.
Decide, but,
Yeah.
if there's other potential developments that certainly offset some of the cost.
Okay.
Shares the burden of others.
Okay.
Really want to try to do that with any development.
Yeah, thanks for that input.
Yeah, thank you for that information. Really, we don't have much more to discuss on funding, so, do you want to table this for next week?
Yeah, we still have a lot to gather.
Yeah.
And we do, so.
Do you want to set a time frame, or do you want to
What do we got?
see what we got for more information and then schedule a meeting?
I might have to look at our calendars too. I don't have meetings next week, or
Yeah, I know goes out sometime next week too, so.
Okay. So let's, we can go ahead and table it for now and then revisit it the week after. Can you go ahead and schedule it for the week after that? You need a motion? Table
I don't think we need
We don't
to.
need
We're
to.
just,
it? We're just table it. Okay.
we're not making any decisions. We're just gonna
Okay.
table it.
All right. All right. Anything else?
Is there any particular information you want to go find and go research other than whatever the file the sheriff?
Yeah, let's just take a look at the
has?
file the sheriff's office has. And the most important thing is the funding, so we need to look and see if there is an option to use LATCF funds to do this, so.
And if there's other options for other development we can explore.
Yeah, lots of other development or other people coming in that would,
Continued interest or if there's a way
Joint
to develop
venture.
it with leaving some space for other development, you can
okay,
create desire.
okay. All right, this meeting's adjourned.